Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Cruickshank. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Cruickshank with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're going to be talking with Paula Cruickshank. Paula is the Senior Vice President of BDC, Financing and Consulting Services across 33 business centers in her province. She has more than 25 years of banking industry experience. She has some great thoughts to share around how to lead teams, lessons that she's learned throughout her career. Looking forward to today's conversation with Paula. So can you give us just a little bit of your career story? I love to hear people's backgrounds and just kind of how you've gotten to where you are today.
So the way I like to introduce myself now is I am a development banker. And a development banker is a bit of a strange term to most people. They know what merchant bankers are and they know what investment bankers are, but they haven't necessarily heard of a development banker. So my background is in structured finance. So I worked at a chartered bank in Canada for over a decade and learned the craft of securitization. So basically during the financial crisis, my skills were in pretty hot demand. So I came to the Business Development Bank of Canada. At that point in time, they were supporting the asset-backed securities market, which was a form of financing for a lot of businesses that support the GDP in Canada. Okay. So they didn't want that to go down the drain. So I worked to run an emergency program, and then we established a business. Taking some of the best ideas around us, we put together a business that helped to serve small finance companies. So I did that for about 8 years and then moved over to our core business. And our core business at BDC is supporting entrepreneurs with loans and advice. And in Canada, we have a lot of small businesses. About 98% of our businesses have fewer than 500 people working for them. Okay. And they don't always get the support they need from the Canadian banking system. So we're there to fill the gaps. And I learned that business while I was in British Columbia, which is our province most to the west in the country. And that was a wonderful experience. It's one of our smaller regions. And then during the global pandemic, I started running Ontario. And so that's a much bigger population, more business centers, more account managers on the ground. And that's where I am today.
Okay. So I like to ask this question of most every guest. If you were able to spin back time and talk to that 22-year-old Paula, what advice would you give her?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm quite in touch with my inner 22-year-old Paula. There's a couple things. I learned very early in my career the importance of collaboration and teamwork, but I learned it the hard way. Someone told me that I was basically, as a recent MBA grad, that I was taking up too much oxygen in the room. I was making my projects the most urgent when they might not necessarily have been viewed that way by others. And so that very important lesson around collaboration is something I've continued to use my entire career. And it's a little bit about listening to what is going on for other people and making sure that I have the right context for my inquiries, for my demands, and for the business that I'm running.
So any advice that you heard early on in your career that you, looking back on, you should have ignored or you did ignore?
So one of the most frustrating pieces of feedback, and I'm sure lots of younger people hear this today. I remember coming to my first review when I joined Scotiabank. Scotiabank was the chartered bank that I worked for, and I'd been in the corporate banking unit for about a year, and I felt like I was slogging away, and I was doing the absolute best I could. And the senior leader that was delivering the review said, "It's just time." And that was something I couldn't do anything about, and I just had to be patient. And it was time in the role, and that's something I didn't appreciate at that time. There was nothing I could do about it, but with the benefit of hindsight, there was some truth to it, and I looked back at it. But yeah, at that point, there was nothing I could do. Just had to be patient.
So thinking back to that first leadership position, a lot of our listeners are first-time leaders, first-time CEOs, and so they're trying to figure out as they're in the role, and maybe they've been an individual contributor, and now they're tapped on the shoulder to lead a group. Think back to that time when you had your first group, and what things do you wish you would have known earlier as far as being a leader and leading others?
Thanks so much for asking that question, Mark. It was really interesting. So what I didn't tell you a whole lot about during my career, I grew up in an investment bank, and an investment bank, they're not really known for leadership. They're known for executing on transactions. And when I had my first team, and the team was quite small, it was about 6 people. But it was growing rapidly. And what I didn't know is right around the corner, I was going to soon be leading 22 people and then moving to running a region with 240. So it was a particularly important time for me to understand. I had been leading the team for a while, and what I had an epiphany through the benefit of an executive coach and my patient boss. I was reporting to the CFO at the time. And what happened was I had a realization all of a sudden that it wasn't about executing better on particular ideas or particular deals or any of that. It wasn't about running the business better. It was about me being a better person and being able to, it was about stepping into that leadership role. And leadership isn't about execution anymore. It's about helping the people around you to execute better. It's about removing obstacles. It's about exemplifying and role modeling the appropriate behaviors. It's about listening to those people and figuring out what their particular motivation is so that you can bring that on board. So yeah, it was a complete realization, and it happened to me in the middle of a triangulation with my coach, with my boss, and myself. And it kind of left me at a loss for words, that I had not understood what a leader was. But once I did, it really helped me for the rest of my career.
Well, that's great that you had a coach. A lot of times people wait till much later when they're in trouble to get a coach, and it sounds like you got one involved. Was that your idea, or was that your boss's?
Well, I have to say, I am a real believer in coaching, and I have used a number. So I've used about 3 different coaches at pivotal points in my career, and each one has brought something different to me. What happened was a failure. I went away for a period of time. I was very lucky to do a secondment. So I worked as an individual contributor in another division. I went to our venture capital division.
Okay.
And that was fascinating for me, and I really enjoyed it. My boss had asked me to keep an eye on the other division, the securitization division, which wasn't entirely fair, because it meant that I was working I was working at 110%.
Sure.
Not just my usual 100%, but I was having to do the other job at 20% of the time and the new job 80% of the time. And that ended up to 110. But basically, the team didn't do well. I got a 2 that year. We have a 5-point rating scale, and I got a 2 on the results. And I think it was a lack of ability to manage from a distance that I saw. And so that was the point to launch me forward into working with a coach. And it was a point of acknowledging that I still had a lot to learn. And I've never looked back. I know I have lots to learn still. And I'm very happy to work with coaches because the work of leadership is never done. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. I always like to ask in my line of work, about those lessons that you learned. And a lot of times it comes out of pain that you learn your most valuable lessons. And that sounds like you definitely, it's probably a gift that you had that early in your career.
Absolutely.
So think about it's kind of around, and I know you work a lot around, helping others that now that you're giving back. But talk about building kind of more of a culture of growth within an organization, as well as the teams that you've led. How do you encourage that as far as to continue to stretch and grow?
Yeah, it's something that we look for in the people that we hire. It's something that we really believe in and talk about a lot at a leadership level. Just to give you some context, the Business Development of Canada, where I am today, is a crown corporation, which means the government of Canada is our shareholder. And the organization is about 3,000 people, and we have really big ambitions. We really want to support small and medium-sized enterprises. I think we want to punch above our weight in terms of our impact. And one of the things the organization has done extremely well, I think, has been promoting from within. And so we really see that. We spend quite a bit of time talking about our talent and plotting their path to growth and giving them stretch assignments. So we know that that's what's required for growth. You said it really well. Growth comes from pain sometimes. We all know that in the gym, but it's true in our careers as well. And so I think it's the focus on people, the belief that people learn over their career. We spend a lot of time on learning and development, and all of those things come from a core belief that people can grow. And then it's a theme throughout everything we do. We want our clients to grow. We're trying to grow bigger businesses in Canada. We want our impact to grow. And so that growth mindset, how can we do things differently to get to where we want to get is just deeply embedded in the organization. And it's a part of our culture.
So with leaders, a lot of times when they first come into a role, they're trying to figure out kind of the team, as well as, everything all the moving parts. What are some tips that you give as far as you've led other leaders, kind of the time and the focus? Where should they be putting their time in that first year of leadership? What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, I'll share another one of my coaching stories. So when I went to BC, when I went to British Columbia, it was not only changing market, because I'd spent 22 years in Toronto in that financial system. And so I needed to learn a new region, but I also needed to learn a new business. I was a securitization expert. I'd done syndications, and I'd basically done institutional finance. I did some VC, but I hadn't worked with small and medium-sized enterprises. So I had to learn a lot. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that a leader needs to realize. They don't have all the answers. And that's okay. You do have to make decisions at certain points. That's your responsibility. But it's okay to spend time with your team and learning about the business. So my coach helped me to actually put together a plan of how I was going to learn. And that was incredibly important. And we put together stakeholders and how well I knew them and how much time I needed to spend with them. Because when you're a leader, it becomes about time.
Right.
So the number one rule she taught me was you spend the most important part of your time with your direct reports because they're the ones who are delivering. And then you got to understand the political and organizational landscape to decide where else you're going to spend time. It's about influence. It's about making sure you know what's going on. And allocating your time can be an incredibly important tool.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. I know as a leader, you're continuing to grow, and you said that's important to you as far as to continue to develop. Are there any books that you've read either recently or in the past that you recommend to other leaders that you think would be helpful?
Oh my goodness. So I love this question because leaders are readers. So
Yep.
there's so many that I've been. In fact, I think it becomes there's so many out there. You have to be a bit careful. Obviously, the one I really like is Radical Candor. That's a one that we've all talked about. So that's kind of basic reading. I think Brene Brown has helped me out a lot. So wherever you want to go on that, Dare to Lead would be one. But I regularly get to meet consultants, and many of them have written books. An interesting one that I heard about that I'm dying to read. I haven't read it yet. It's called the Trusted Learning Advisor, and I'll have to get the name of the author to you, but it's Keith, and I'm forgetting his last name, but basically that one's really interesting to me because what we're seeing in business is the skill sets needing to be replaced faster and faster.
Yep.
So what's most important to us are people who know how to learn. So that learning advisor is a really interesting concept, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of work, what do you do to recharge?
Oh, thank you for that question. So I am a skier.
Okay.
So I absolutely love skiing. It's a little challenging in Ontario. Our hills are not very big. When I was out in BC, it was a little more accessible. But on the weekends, I like to go skiing with my 11-year-old son. He actually was doing some ski racing this year, which was very
Okay.
exciting. So yeah, time with family, number one, that recharges me. And getting outside, doing something active. In the summer, I like to cycle, but skiing in the winter.
Okay. So, what parting advice would you have for a new leader?
For a new leader, I think it has to be listening. I think it's an undervalued skill. I think we started to give it more value during the pandemic. It's not easy being an empathetic leader because you're asked to play a role and you have to constantly find the balance between what the organization is asking you to do and what individuals need and want. But I do think if you recognize that and listen, you're going to find a good path in between.
Well, Paula, I appreciate, again, your time and your insights. I know you've shared some great information that's going to be helpful for our listeners, and wish you continued success in all you're doing.
Thank you very much, Mark. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.